If you're authentically curious about something, it stops feeling like work to learn. And if it stops feeling like work to learn about something, then you can grow because you're constantly learning. I tell my team, dare to be stupid.
Since you joined, Crunchbase has over 4x its unique users, which is incredible, and increased its annual recurring revenue by 75x, which is nuts.
Listening, engaging, understanding, having a dialogue, learning from customers does not mean you have to do what they say.
Challenging the assumptions that they are making themselves so that you're building in the right direction together.
The question I like to ask is what's going to make them a hero and what's not going to make them a villain? I have more failures than successes, but it's because if you learn something from every failure, you can take a win from something that initially seems like a loss. When ChatGPT was released, it quickly changed what it meant to be a software company.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
The revenue tech stack is messy right now. All the leaders that I'm talking to are reevaluating their stacks really from the ground up. Do we need 10 different solutions? What were we even solving for in the first place when we bought this piece of technology? Was it a ZERP era nice to have, or was it a need to have for our entire revenue team? If you are one of those leaders, I would recommend that you take a look at Apollo. Maybe you think you know Apollo. Maybe you've taken a look at them in the past. But I personally looked under the hood recently, and if your goal is to reduce and simplify your tech stack and have best-in-breed data layered in with AI, they would be at the top of my list. There's a reason that Rippling and Stripe both just recently switched over, and we worked with their team to create an interactive demo page, which you can check out at www.apollo.io/GTM. Almost all I hear these days is we need to figure out how to best leverage AI in our sales process and how can we consolidate and simplify our tech stack. With Apollo, I believe you can accomplish both. So again, check them out for yourself at www.apollo.io/GTM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Go-to-Market podcast. It has been a busy personal week. Just got back from SF where we hosted a dinner for some of our go-to-market operators and our founders. And I'm not allowed to say much publicly, but this week we did cross a huge milestone at the fund that we're extremely excited about and what it means for, the future as we try and, build this thing into one of the most founder-loved and sought-after VC funds in the world. And more on that when we can officially announce it. But Max, Paul, and I will be flying over to Japan tomorrow as we're recording this episode anyway to celebrate and plan out the future a little bit. So if any listeners do have recommendations for Japan, shoot me a DM. My DMs are open. Incredibly excited about what's to come. And of course, it's fitting that we have one of our incredible limited partners on the pod today. I'm joined by Neal. Neal, my man, welcome to the show.
Hey, Scott, thanks for having me. And yeah, congrats on the thing. And honored to be part of the fund and grateful to get a chance to speak with you today, man.
Likewise. We're incredibly fortunate to have you involved in the fund and incredibly fortunate to be able to have conversations like this with someone that has just the breadth of experience you have. Always like to do a quick bio for our listeners. So Neal Patel is the Chief Revenue Officer at Crunchbase. Many of us are probably familiar with Crunchbase, but a leading platform for private company intelligence. Neal brings over 25 years of experience in the tech industry, proven track record executing progressive growth strategies, landing partnerships, developing revenue teams, and building out and scaling winning revenue teams. And you kind of support all the go-to-market functions. So that includes strategic partnerships, sales, BD, marketing, customer success, experience, RevOps rolls up to you as well. And you're sort of a de facto GM of your data licensing business as well. So you've got your hands in everything. And I know since you joined, Crunchbase has over 4x'd its unique users, which is incredible, and increased its annual recurring revenue by 75x, which is nuts. And now you guys are working with brands like the S&P, LinkedIn, NVIDIA, Monday.com, Perplexity, G2, FactSet, Amazon, Snowflake. And then somehow, amongst all of that, you're also an active board member, advisor, investor. Um, that's a lot. Anything else people should know about your background?
That's funny. I think that's great.
Yeah, love it. And you also spent, what was it, almost like 8 years at Google back in the day?
Yeah, I spent 8 years at Google. I was there early Google Maps days. Helped build out Google Maps. Helped. I ran our strategic partnerships team for Google Search, and then helped GTM Google Fiber in its early days.
Must be really gratifying to work on like a product like Google Maps that literally people use like every single day. Like I would actually be running around the city just lost 24/7 if it wasn't for Google Maps. So it must be cool to actually like see that come to life and just be like a part of human existence now.
Yeah, I mean, I still run around many cities lost, despite Google Maps. I can't imagine how much more lost I'd be. But yeah, that was awesome. It was such a great, uh, right place, right time for me. I got to join like, early days, like I said, and just be part of building something that, I was a user of prior to joining Google, and it had like some personal ties to me too. Like my grandmother was one of the first was one of the first female high school principals in her state in India. And her teaching discipline was geography. Uh, and so and there's a couple of there's a myriad of other like kind of just like sometimes the world kind of comes together for you, and that Google Maps moment definitely did. And I got to do a lot of really great work. I got to work with really really great people. Uh, and like you said, it's awesome to still see like this is. I think it's over, well over 15 years ago when I started there. And then some of the work that I helped with is still there. You still see it. It's obviously gotten better and more. Uh, but you can see that it's super gratifying.
Yeah, I love it. Now we just need Tesla to license Google Maps. I feel like the Tesla maps, or no, sorry, Uber by mistake. The Uber maps, they seem to be a little wonky these days. So let's get that partnership going. But anyway, man, we were doing a little prep before this, and I wanted to just dive right into it with you because we actually had another guest bring up this topic. It was David Knight, co-founder of Avara recently, and he kind of went against this old adage of the customer is always right. And you shared a similar sentiment, but you framed it as listening to your customers without obeying. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So uh, we so just in short, like it means listening, engaging, understanding, having a dialogue, learning from customers does not mean you have to do what they say. The point of listening, the point of engaging, the point of trying to understand is so that you can develop a really really solid sense of the problems that they have, uh, and where you and your company may add value. And honestly, I think 50%, 60% of the time, it's not it's not your first instinct of what you're gonna do. Like, I make a widget, my widget does X. I'm gonna find all the people in the world that that have a need for X and sell my widget to them. And I'm just gonna call you, talk about the product, validate that you have this thing, and then talk about my product and kind of like, you know, square peg, square hole, right? A lot of times you have your square peg and there's a round hole. And what oftentimes happens is people who don't put in the time to talk to customers and understand them and go in with this, like, I will listen and obey, or the customer's always right, they miss out on opportunities because very quickly they're like, they disqualify really early. Or they come back to their team, they come back to their product team, and they're like, well, we don't have parity with this, and this X, Y, and Z competitors. Or, oh, we need this because that's what they said they wanted. But you don't ask why. Like, why do you want this? What's the underlying thing you're trying to achieve? Like a question I like to ask, and I coach my teams to ask, is like, what's going to make you a hero and what's going to make you a villain? You obviously have to get to a place in your relationship with your, you know, POC where you can ask those questions. But if you can, there's gold in the answers to those questions. Uh, and you can oftentimes find a way. And this is where it's nice for me in particular. Yes, I run the sales and customer success teams, but being someone who also runs our strategic partnerships and corp dev teams, uh, where I'm not here to sell you my product. I'm here to solve your problem with all that Crunchbase brings to bear. And one of the things that, yes, Crunchbase brings to bear is our amazing product and technology, but it's also the relationships and partnerships that we have with other players in the ecosystem. And so if I know how to solve your problem, it doesn't matter really if my product won't solve the whole problem. If I know how to put together a package, some of which is Crunchbase, some of it might be other partners of ours, and we can come together and solve a problem for you, um, and or solve a problem you didn't know you had because I dug into what you were asking. Uh, my chief product officer and I, we went on a tour, like a customer tour, to engage with some of our largest partners and customers to just learn, to tell them a little bit what we were doing, some of the future roadmap stuff, and kind of validate our thinking, so we weren't kind of self high fiving on the exec team and on the leadership team at Crunchbase. Uh, and you know, an example of what you're talking about is the first things they'd say is, well, you need more companies in your database, or you need better contact data. And I'd ask, like, okay, so if I did it, let's just assume I did exactly what you said. What's the increase in your level of likelihood to renew the contract? Can you tell me right now you renew? Actually, can you tell me you'll renew for, like, how much more would you pay if I did it? Because you're gonna have to pay more. So are you telling me you would pay more, or you would buy more of my stuff, or at least you'd renew? And when you have that conversation, a lot of times what comes out is like, well, I don't know. Why don't you know? Well, because this is, and eventually you get to, like, the real thing they're trying to do and the real thing they're trying to solve for, what's going to make them a hero and what's not going to make them a villain. Uh, and many times you don't need to, it surfaces lots of cool stuff, that can influence, yes, the deal, but also your roadmap, which is something my CPO and I we talk a lot about.
Yeah, that's a powerful set of questions. What's going to make you a hero and what's going to make you a villain? And I just love also the idea of doing a customer tour. If there's, revenue leaders listening to this or founders listening to this that have not done something like that, I think it's definitely a best practice now more than ever, as it's harder to get new logos, and you got to make sure that your customer love is, really, really high when it does come to time for renewal. And you said something there too about, I feel like in software we can get really lost in this, like, parity game, right? Because our customers are telling us all about this features and functionality of this other product that they're sort of using, and it's very tempting to get into this parity game. And the parity game is often just like a race to the bottom, and everyone starts looking the same, versus I think the way that you've had approached it is, yeah, we're going to be world class at this. And if you need X or Y, here's these great partners that we work extremely close with. And then you don't have to get into this, the parity game. Yeah. I love it. And you actually have a story that kind of brings this to life, and we love stories on this. We try and make it a story-based podcast when we can. And so I want to transport you back to late 2022. ChatGPT was released. That almost overnight had a huge impact on what it meant to be a software company. I think we all woke up and the world was different. Um, Walk me through that time period and how you were able to kind of like adapt.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, so when ChatGPT was released, like it quickly changed what it meant to be a software company. And we, you know, a few things became clear. One of which was everyone was asking, every customer was asking, like, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing with Gen AI? What are you doing in this space? How are you changing yourselves? And then how can you help me? How can you use that to help me? And we quickly, like many others, this isn't novel, but quickly came to the opinion that that AI wasn't the what you are doing, it's how you get something done, right? And really focused on the outcome, right? Like so, AI is a tool, but great, we could use AI. We could also use the internet. Like we could use anything. We could use mobile. We could use cloud. Like you could pick a thing, but like, what's the outcome you're looking for? And what we learned was, the it's just like anything else. Like these paradigm shifting, advancements. They affect productivity. They affect efficiency. They affect scale. Right. And they're looking for positive outcomes on the improvements in those things, right? Like, how can you make my situation better? And for us, we knew, like the challenge for us was like, we knew we had an amazing proprietary data set that everybody trusted, and loved. And we had a foundation of like machine learning and artificial intelligence in our product already. But now the task was like, how do we harness the latest, kind of proliferation and to be honest, like became much less expensive to use this stuff. Uh, how do we take advantage of that new dynamic and apply it to our unique data to not just meet customers' expectations, but like dramatically exceed them? Um, so we talked a lot about it at every level of the company. So like obviously at the exec level, but like what was we had offsites, and I remember walking around, poking my head into different meeting rooms and hearing groups of, engineers and PMs and salespeople and marketers, like all in a little room talking about like, what could we do? What could we do? And some of the ideas were wild. Some were boring. Some were, some were like off the hook. Like, wow, like, yeah, why can't we do that? And ultimately, like one of the things that we really like got down to is like, it's almost like a first principles type of thing. Is like, okay, well, people are coming to Crunchbase, uh, and fundamentally they're looking at our data, our facts about companies, and I'll take funding because everyone thinks of Crunchbase it's like funding data, right? Cool, like, and they love us because we have funding data. Like, why? What do you do with the funding data when you see, that Scott.com raised $25 million, or Scott.ai, I guess I should say.
Yeah. Much better multiple.
uh, Raised $25 million last week. Like, why do you care? Why is that interesting to you? Why do you love that Crunchbase told you that? Right. Well, it's because you're trying to, and depending on who you are, like if you're an investor, you're a salesperson, you're a partnerships person, you're trying to figure out if Scott.ai matters. And if they're growing, if they're a good fit for whatever it is that I'm investing in, my investment thesis, or for my product that I'm trying to sell, or if I'm a recruiter for the type of talent I'm trying to bring into my own company. If I'm just trying to understand a market, if I'm a researcher, like is Scott.ai in the space that I'm interested in, and is his company's growth an indicator of future growth in that industry segment? And then really, what that means is it's insight, it's actionable intelligence that I was looking for, right? Um, and we, a lot more came of it, but it was like, okay, well, it's this intelligence that people are doing. And oftentimes this is where it marries really nicely with the customer tour I was talking to you about, is we would then in parallel, Meg, who's our CPO, he and I would go out and talk to customers. And I'm saying he and I, but it was our whole teams. Like, look, we have lots of people doing lots of things. It's just easier to say he and our teams. We're going out talking to customers and validating some of this. Like, okay, so then what do? Oh, we take this data that you gave us and we marry it with something else that we have, or we do some our own analysis on it. And we come up with this insight that like this company's growing, or this is what the news is saying about this company, or these are the products and services that this company has. And then we act on that in some way, shape, or form, investor, salesperson, partnerships, whatever. And so we were like, well, wait a minute. Like, how long does that take you to do? How many people do you have on that? Like, how hard is that? And it was like, yeah, well, it takes a while and we have a lot of people and it's pretty hard. So we came back and we were like, well, shit, like we could do that for you. And that was like layer one, right? We came back and so we married those things together and we're like, oh, we could do that for you. We quickly learned that we could then like, well, we're like, okay, so then what are you really trying to get at when you want to know about these products and services? You want to know about whether they're growing, whatever. Like, what are you really trying to do? Well, what would really help me get ahead of my own competitors, so my customers telling us like what would help me beat my own competitors, is this is all great to know what's happening now or what just happened. But what if I could predict the future about these companies? Like, help me understand who's going to get acquired, who's going to go public, who's going to grow more. Yes, they've been growing, but are they going to grow even more, or is it going to flatline, right? And we were like, well, we have 17 years of history of Crunchbase collecting this data. We also have 80 million users on our website, 15-ish years of data on like who's going to what pages, what they're doing in the tool, like what lists they're creating, what they're pushing to CRMs, obviously aggregated and anonymized, but we can tell we have a backlog of like, we can go back and validate predictions. So we started making internal predictions for companies and then back testing to see if that prediction would have been true. And it turns out we got pretty good at it. So we're in the process now going back to customers and partners in this like very like thought partnership, like very like almost like it's a cross between biz dev and old school enterprise sales, where you're like, you've way traversed the chasm of like, I'm transactionally selling you. Of course, I have a good relationship with you, that too. But this third thing of now you're looking to me to really like, we're partnering on something as humans and thinking about this problem together. And I've already told you, I don't know if Crunchbase is going to be able to do this whole thing for you. So there's a level of trust where like someone on my team is talking to someone from one of our large partners or large customers. They're like, yeah, you're just going to help us figure this out. And we were able to say like, what if we could predict this stuff? We think we can. And so we're in the process now we were in the process of testing that with partners and customers. We're still testing some of it, but we just started releasing these signals. We released the predictions and insights signal last week, or just before the end of the quarter. Sorry. And that all came from this customer tour mission that we started back over a year and a half ago.
Yeah. I love that. And we'll go and be checking out that product as soon as we wrap up this podcast. I would like to know, I would like to predict the future. That's kind of part of my job, and looking at historical data that Crunchbase has the most of and the most proprietary data set would make sense that you have a pretty accurate view on the future. And that's a powerful thing to have learned through, as you said, like first principles, breaking down, having those tough conversations with the customers. Did you go wrong at any point? Or maybe put differently, would you do anything differently during this kind of period of seismic change?
Yeah, good question. So I'm glad you scoped it with during this period of seismic change because I would. If you're like, have you done anything wrong? Yeah, I've done so many wrong things, Scott.
How long we got?
I was like, I was texting with a company I'm advising earlier this morning, and they're having a little bit of a rough patch, and I said, I'm like, hey, look, I've failed way more than I've succeeded. Like honestly, like I have more failures than successes. But it's because like if you learn something from every failure, you can take a win, from something that initially seems like a loss. And the win that we took during this process that initially seemed like a loss was like, I was one of those people that was like, oh yeah, like feature parity. Like, oh, we're missing this. We're missing this. So your first reaction is you're so proud of this thing that you have at the company. Like, I'm so proud of the product we have. Right. And so when someone says when they're doing this feature comparison, it comes across as a criticism of your product. Right. You're like, oh, and human nature is, I was like, wait, what? Like, no. Don't insult my product. Like, and then it'd be like, okay, we'll fix that. We'll fix that. An example of that was like, people would say, so that's great, Crunchbase. Like you guys understand private companies, therefore you understand private markets, your private market intelligence. But like you only have like 4 million companies. And there are 80 million, hundreds of millions of companies out there. So why don't you get more companies? Because I have X, Y, and Z other provider that has more companies. And this is where some of that, like those tough conversations came through. And, my initial mistake was I turned to Meg and I was like, dude, we have to get more company. And we actually, going back to your point earlier about ChatGPT and generative AI and like how much more the proliferation of it and how much cheaper it's gotten, we actually can create new company profiles very efficiently with great unit economics. But it still costs something, right? And so the kind of the light bulb in at least my brain that went off was like, okay, let's suppose I know actually I can actually create more companies. I can go from 4 million to 40 million if you want, customer Z. What impact would that have? Well, then you'd have the same number of companies or more than this other competitor. And then when I do a side-by-side comparison on my approval deck, you look just as good or better. Okay, awesome. But like, so that solves maybe your CFO's problem from a deal approval optics perspective. But like, does that actually solve the business problem you're trying to solve for? Do you care? Do you care about Joe's shoe store on the corner? Or do you care about finding the next perplexity? Who do you want to sell your wares to? And quickly, and I would say, like, if you want me to get more companies, we totally can. I have the ability. We've validated it with the product team. But what we're doing now is using our resources wisely. So when customers or partners tell us they want more companies, we ask them which ones, and then we go get them. And so we are increasing the size of the database, but we're doing it in a more intelligent, intentional manner that every new company we know is adding value to at least one new customer.
Yeah. What I appreciate, and this feels like almost a masterclass in a lot of your answers when you're talking to customers, you're getting to the question behind the question. And I think that really is like an art. And it, again, could sometimes feel uncomfortable. You really have to push back. And of course that requires, trust and respect, and that is earned to be able to, push back. But, it seems like that's come up sort of again and again, is like making sure that you are challenging the assumptions that they are making themselves, so that you're building in the right direction together. I like that. Okay, now I want to zoom out a little bit. So we had this period of growth, but now this is kind of a big question. But looking back at your entire career, I think many of our listeners would aspire to have a career like yours, what's a learning or a piece of advice more broadly that you could give to listeners on careers?
Well, that was generous of you to say. Thank you for the compliment. I definitely have not had the kind of archetype career. If you looked at the first 15 years of my work experience, you wouldn't say this guy's going to be a CRO of a, SaaS slash DaaS kind of company, or now like an AI company today. But I think like curiosity is somewhat natural. Like all of us as humans have some curiosity, and you kind of run into people every once in a while, like, holy cow, that person really has that. As it can be a superpower. Um, like honestly, for me, curiosity wasn't a superpower until I figured out what curiosity really meant for me, Neal Patel. Like, what do I really care about? Curious about the right things, right? And that's where curiosity meets authenticity. Because if you're authentically curious about something, it stops feeling like work to learn. And if it stops feeling like work to learn about something, then you can grow because you're constantly learning, because learning is filling your bucket on all levels. Like, right. It's filling uh, your bucket in terms of building your capacity and potential and growth, but it's filling your emotional bucket. It's energizing to learn the grind, the grit of reading through whatever it is you have to read through to learn the things, or having conversations, or trying to actually prospect to find people and get them to have a talk with you about something that you want to learn from them, and get them to believe that, like, I'm not actually trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to work for you. I'm not trying to do anything other than something, and I want to know what you know. I want to learn from you. Um, so that's a big thing. I still do that today. I've always done that throughout my career, is try to learn, but not everything. It's the right things, and try to find that balance. The second thing is you have to take risk. Like I tell my team many times, I'm like, dare to be stupid. Uh, it's okay. Um, Much to the chagrin of my mom in my earlier days, she'd say, you know, you I mean, like, we didn't talk about my background prior to Google, but I was a corporate attorney, and prior to that, I was an engineer. Um, and then when my work at Google was not lawyer related at all. I stopped practicing law, and it was a non-legal job. So you can imagine, like, telling your parent, like, oh, engineering school was great. Now I'm going to go to law school. Okay, that kind of makes sense. But being a lawyer was great for 5 years. Now I'm going to go try to get a business job. I don't know what industry, I don't know what role, but Google sounds nice. I'll try that. Um, that is stupid. But you can dare to be stupid, and sometimes things work. Many times they don't. Like, going back, like, I've failed more than I've succeeded. Um, so I think, like, taking risk is the second, and then the last thing uh, is I think everyone looks forward. Like, we all are conditioned, especially today, to, like, what's the next thing I can do? What's the next thing I can do? And it gets to be kind of transactional. You're looking for a raise. You're looking for a promotion. You're looking for the job at the next hot company. But if you could actually think about, like, a spectrum of time, and think about yourself in spectrums of time going forward, and going at looking back and looking forward. So what do I want to do? I don't really care about my next raise. And I'm not saying that now as a CRO. I'm saying this, like, throughout my career. I never cared about the next raise. I never cared about the next promotion. Like, sure, tactically here and there, it's a thing you have to do to get to where you want to be. But those were never really big wins. The win was like, where, like what do I want to be capable of, and how do I want to have been able to prove in that outside in the outside world in the next 5 to 10 years? Like, what am I capable of, and what have I shown I can do? My potential and my output, like the outcomes. Um, and try to get yourself on a path to do that. And then the other side of the spectrum, look back, like, connect your dots. There's that old Steve Jobs, I think it was a Stanford commencement speech. But, like, connect your dots, because oftentimes you know way more, you are capable of so much more, and you're so much more intrinsically powerful than you think you are if you just take a minute and look back at your history and what you have done in the past, both successfully and failed at, because you've learned from those failures. And even if you don't learn anything in the moment, if you give yourself the grace to do a little post-mortem, even if it's years later, you're going to get some nuggets of knowledge and self-improvement out of it.
Lots of good stuff in there. And I think I've been taking your dare to be stupid advice for a long time myself. You do need to take a lot of risks.
It's worked out for you, friends.
It's so far so good, but continue to dare to be stupid and don't lose that, because that is it's fun and you learn a lot. And I definitely hear you, particularly in this time period, even for me personally right now, as we've hit this milestone. The way I'm unfortunately wired, and as you mentioned, most of us are wired, it's like, all right, next thing. What's the next thing? How do we, go bigger, get better? And, if you immediately jump into that mode, you're going to miss a lot of the learnings and reflections from really letting the thing, the action, the achievement kind of soak in. And, your last piece of, don't be focused on the promotion or the raise. That's really like just a byproduct of you becoming the person with the skills and the knowledge that deserves that thing. And, it's one of my favorite quotes. And I think it's Charlie Munger, but I feel like he gets credit for so many quotes that might not be his. But basically, it's something around like, you don't get what you want, you get what you deserve. And I think that's very, very true in a lot of cases anyway. But that was great, man. Thanks for sharing. I want to go to a listener question. We get a ton of really great questions. I just personally like this one. It's a little off topic from what we've discussed today, but I'm really curious to get your take. The question is, with more and more rev tech platforms being created every day, it feels like we have more visibility than ever. Do you think with the right technology in place, you can reduce the number of midline sales managers needed per rep?
Yeah, that's a great question. Whoever wrote that in, if you're listening, good question.
It's a good question.
Right?
I almost want to like maybe we even take some liberties with the question of like, do we need less midline managers across the board? Even it feels like that almost is a theme that might be emerging, and would love your take.
Yeah, it's a good question. And like I love like expanding it a little bit. Like it's funny, like I mentioned earlier, like that you can look back at history and things like you often find similar things that have happened in the past. And I mentioned my time back at Google. There was a time at Google like where OKRs were a thing at Google, but also becoming a thing now at other companies, like much more widely practiced. And there was there combined with a lot of improved operating communication and processes. Almost a similar question came up, was like, does Google need mid-level managers? Because we have these other things, and this is obviously way before AI rev tech. But like that similar kind of question comes up, like do people need managers? And I think like similarly, like I can't believe I'm talking about OKRs right now, and it's in the context of the AI question. But it actually makes sense. I'm just going to recycle something I've said before. Is like I've said to people that like OKRs are a tool to help us do our jobs better and achieve our goals. Right? They're a tool to help us win. We are not a tool to OKRs. Right? And if you've ever had to write them or evaluate them, gone through that pain with a group of people, I think it's important to have that in your head. Like it's a tool for us. We are not a tool to the OKR. It's similar with AI. Like AI is a tool to help us. We are not a tool to AI. It's not going to solve your problem. It's a tool. It's to help you. You don't look at the hammer and say, "Hammer, go build me a house." And in some cases, AI is going to be able to do a lot more than a hammer. But it's in the context of this listener's question, like I think absolutely not. Like there's no fucking way salespeople don't need managers. And the easiest, most like precise way to cut that is AI is never going to be able to put their arm around you after you get beat up on a call and be like, yeah, that happened to me, man, so many times. Don't worry about it. Here's what I did. Right? AI is never going to be able to like look at you and be able to understand like that you won a deal, but you got lucky. Like you actually fucked up most of what you did and you just kind of got lucky, you know? There's so I don't think, I think what it's going to do, like where it may have impact, it may require fewer managers because the managers themselves will be more efficient, will be more productive. And it's possible then that they can, a lot of the time and effort they spend doing manual or pseudo manual work that, you know, kind of that limits their capacity for management to like maybe 6 or 7 direct reports. AI may help a manager have 10 or 15 or more because they can focus on the things. Let AI do what AI does really well, and let the human manager with their bring to bear their humanity and their experience and all the other things that they bring, their relationships and so on, and focus on that part. Like, I could talk about that question with you for like an hour. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think you're spot on. And if anyone has ever been in a sales manager role, you know how much of your job is like part-time therapist, and that is not being replaced anytime soon. No one wants to hear the AI saying like, "Oh, it's okay. This happens. This happened to XYZ person." It's like, no, I've literally had this exact same experience. I went through it. Here's what I learned from it. Here's how we maybe don't do this next time. But like, I see you, this happens. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think.
And there's a lot of motivation too. Like this for many roles, but particularly in sales, like the reverse thing is true. Like my motivation as you know, as a individual contributor, yes, it's the incentives that are in place. Like that is like Charlie Martin quote, like show me the incentives, I'll show you the result. But it's more than just the incentives. Like, yeah, I'm going to get up and get back up after I got knocked down and get back on a call or get back on a Zoom or go meet somebody and try again. Because yes, I'm incentivized to do that to get paid. I want to win. I'm intrinsically motivated. But a lot of times it's like, I want to impress my boss. I want Scott to be like, fuck yeah, Neal, good job, dude. Like, I want to go to bat for Scott. I want to walk through a wall for Scott. I don't know what we're going to get to a play. Like, you show me the AE who's going to walk through a wall for AI, and then I will show you a crazy AE.
Totally. I love it. All right, man. That brings us to our final 2 questions. And again, we could probably have spent an entire episode on that listener question. So again, thank you for the great question. These final 2, I always keep them the same. They are intentionally vague. So you can take them really anywhere that you'd like. And the first one is, what is one widely held belief that most CROs still believe to be true that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could go back to the kind of thing about listen to your customers, but since you already had someone say the customer's not always right, I think one thing that's like that where I might think a little bit differently than other people is, I think this is going to change going forward. You talk about playbooks, right? Every CRO has a playbook, right, or a series of playbooks, right? And I, I I'm gonna pretend I'm Crunchbase and make a prediction. Like I think there's always a place for playbooks, but playbooks aren't going to be the top level thing that a really great sales leader or CRO is going to have. Um, like I'm going to be surprised if a year or 2 years from now, founders and CEOs are hiring CROs and saying, "I want the person who's got the playbook for doing this because I just need that playbook enacted in my company." Uh, because while it does matter and you do need one eventually, but I think context is changing so fast today now, in all facets. Like we talked about AI, that's just one, but like Like the era of spray and pray is dead, and that's not new. People, I'm not the first person, I'm not even the millionth person to say that. Uh, the email inboxes are pretty much all spam now. So is my LinkedIn email. So like my phone, even I don't answer the phone or answer texts anymore from people that right. Uh, so a lot of the ways of doing things like sales activity may matter a lot less, like quantity of activity. There used to be an old formula where you could be like, you just want to up your number. There's a formula, that you can do and just up your activity in various parts of this formula wherever you can efficiently, and your ARR will go up. I think that shit's all going to go away. I think those kind of playbooks are going to be gone. You have to get back to foundation and fundamentals when you're in a new situation, in an existing company or at a new company that you're about to go join to be their CRO. And I think it starts with really simple things like really understand the product, really understand the problem set that you are trying to solve as a company. Try to understand whether that aperture for that problem set can be broadened, right? Is there value out there that people don't even know could be captured? Another way of saying that is, can you teach someone they have a problem they didn't even know about, right? Those kinds of figuring that stuff out and really digging into there, becoming I talked about those three legs of you absolutely need to be have a good relationship. Yes. You need to be transactional. Sometimes that it's not like you got a job to do. They got a job to do. You have to get shit done. They want something. Sometimes you just give them an answer really quickly. You don't have to ask 17 questions to get to the crux or the root cause. But every once in a while, you know when to pull that card out and be like, well, wait a minute, we're gonna scratch this one for a little bit, right? So you get to that third prong. That third leg is transactional relationship. But now I'm your thought partner. But I'm on your side. I'm on your side. And I think CROs any kind of sales leader, not just CROs, any sales leaders who start and build from that foundation and try to develop that sort of principles-based approach to understanding your context, and then go look at the market, go then do things like market sizing and TAM and SAM and so on, and then go figure out what motion is it? Is it a PLG motion? Is it an enterprise sales motion? Is it a combo? Is it something else? Is it some other monetization motion that we need to do? Is it what is it? And then build your playbook for that. And it may even be different in different markets, geographic markets like SMB, mid-market, enterprise. I think a lot of that's going to change. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. Strongly agree with that take and that point of view. I'll almost go as far as throughout my career in the various startups I've been a part of, I have yet to see that work where a new CRO comes in, they have a playbook, they implement that playbook, and boom, magically, we hit our numbers. Quite often, it's very disruptive. You actually probably miss a quarter or two, and then you go back to learning, adapting, building a not to say playbooks don't work, but you have to learn and evolve and adapt from within, not from external.
It's almost like it's not that playbooks don't matter. You just have to realize you have to create a new playbook. You can't be bringing your old playbook around. That old playbook doesn't matter. There's things you can learn from it, but you can't bring the whole thing forward. You have to build a new one everywhere you go.
Totally. Yeah. And just, I think as the pace of innovation and change speeds up, so do the pace and innovation of how quickly we're changing our playbooks. They kind of go hand in hand. Whereas maybe, even 8 years ago, maybe a playbook from last year could have worked this year, but now it's almost every few months you need to really, completely rewrite it. So you've mentioned a lot of these examples throughout the pod, and one I really like is, striving to be a thought partner. But what is one specific go-to-market strategy or tactic outside of that that's really been working for you and your team today at Crunchbase?
I would go back to kind of this, we're institutionalizing this customer tour thing that we did, and trying to make it part of our our DNA versus a initiative, right? It started out was an initiative with me and our chief product officer. We were going to do a customer tour, even the label tour, uh, implies that it has a beginning and an end, right? And we've since realized and that there is no end. It's not a tour. It's part of our practice now, and it's something that everybody should be doing. And so we're encouraging all of our folks, and I'm also the entire GTM, not just sales, but also CS, not just sales and CS, but also partnerships, BD, corp dev. Get out there, and meet people, meet them where they are, have them come to us, go to conferences, wherever you can, but be intentional about meeting them and try to approach it from the perspective that we just talked about, right? Which is listen, don't obey. Understand the three prongs. You got to do those three things. Right. There is real life practicality where you have to be transactional sometimes. Yes, of course. We all know about relationship development, but if you can get to a place where you're on their side and they think of you as you're actually on my team as my thought partner on this, you're trying to find a way for both of us to win. That's a great place to be, and you can get lots of great nuggets that obviously will help you make money and grow your revenue, but will inform your product roadmap much more intelligently, I think, because it's all driven on it's not saying what the market wants, it's understanding a little bit ahead of what the market might need, because you did that work, right? I think that's that was something that we picked up, that we are now institutionalizing on the GTM team, and we're bringing PMs and marketers and other folks from the organization and even engineers into those conversations now. And in some cases, we're even experimenting with forward deploying some of our team into some of our largest customers and partners and having them build stuff together, which is super, super exciting.
That's super cool. I love when the answer to that question is super actionable. Everyone can start thinking about that right now and implement kind of this idea of we'll call it a never-ending customer tour, kind of like the U2 of go to market. I think they've been on tour for straight for 50 years. Just take that and run with it. I love that. Well, Neal, thank you so much for the time, man. This was super enjoyable. All these conversations like this, I find really fun. They're stimulating for me personally, and fill up my cup. So thank you for taking the time to hang out with me and share your wisdom with our listeners. And to all our listeners, I say it every week, but listening is one thing, executing something totally different. Take these lessons, these stories, trying to apply them to your business and try and move the needle, because it is tough out there. And Neal, where can folks follow along? Are you a Twitter guy, LinkedIn guy? If people want to continue to learn from you.
I'm on LinkedIn. I don't post much. I'm a doer, not a talker. But I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect. You can find me there. You could also find me at Crunchbase. Ping me at Crunchbase. Neal at Crunchbase.com. Super old school, easy. And thanks for having me, Scott. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm grateful for the time.
Thank you, man. And I'm glad we made you a talker today, not just a doer. So appreciate it. And we'll catch up soon. And thank you all. We'll see you next week.